Hello, I'm Robert Emmett Hernan. I'm head of Blue Stack Productions, the publisher of Irish Environment, an online magazine covering environmental matters on the island of Ireland. I'm very happy today to be here in Dublin at Taisce's offices with Pat Oliver. Pat, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
And it's good to see you again.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Pat and I met each other several years ago when I interviewed her as part of the Green Schools program. And today we're going to talk to her because she has retired and she has a wealth of experience, which I want to tap into as best I can.
Well, I hope to come up with some useful answers, but I don't promise.
Now, Pat, when did you join Taisce?
Well, I was approached by Taisce way back in, about 76. That's a long time ago. I was not a member. I had been working as a European editor with the Macmillan Company of New York, and a person in Dublin who had worked with me was asked by the director then of Taisce, John O'Loughlin Kennedy, if he knew anyone who would edit a newspaper. He wanted a newspaper for the organisation, and this person recommended me. Okay. I had worked as an editor and I've been in publishing almost all my life, but I had never done any, the knowledge of how to actually set up a page and how to understand the whole, layout of it. Okay. So that was fun. But the one thing is that you will understand actually in your position is, for an organisation, any organisation, not just Taisce, if you edit their magazine, you get to know everyone. Yes. You get right to the heart of the organisation. Whereas you could join as a member, and you could even be on a subcommittee, or you could be on, But I very quickly was right at the heart of the organisation because you were writing about everything that was going on in it. So you were talking to people who were on the Environment Executive. You were talking to people who were in the associations. I mean, at that stage, Taisce had local associations all over the country.
And now, how long did you? Now, this was as a volunteer. When did you join as a staff member in Taisce?
Oh, that was years later. What happened then was that I was asked to go forward as secretary of the organisation. So I was I was honorary secretary for 3 years. I was then elected deputy chair for 3 years, and then I became national chairwoman. And I chaired the whole organisation for 4 years. And at the end of that, it really led to the setting up of the Environmental Education Unit. Because
and when was that, Pat?
1993. At the time, the Worldwide Fund for Nature had quite a lot of money, and instead of moving into other countries where they didn't have a branch, which I think was very far-seeing of them, they supported organisations in other countries. So they gave me the money to carry out a business plan with a consultant. Right. I don't know, Bob, if you've ever done a business plan.
Yes.
It's so painful. It was the most painful thing I think I've ever done. It took 3 years, and the first thing that the consultant said was, to have a successful business plan, you must bring everybody in your organisation with you. They must support you. Right. And we had thousands of members, 32 local associations or whatever we had at the time, 30, a council of 50, 2 executive committees. So the first thing to do was to get all of those to buy into the idea of a business plan and where we would be, where we were going. And so we did it. And what came out of it was very interesting, because the first thing we did was ask our members what they wanted the organisation, what to them we should do, what was the most important thing to them. And they said that we should be involved in education. Okay. Now, the interesting thing was that we'd always been involved in education to a certain extent. We would run education competitions. Maybe once a year we would have some kind of an education competition, and we would get a sponsor for it. But this was a different thing. They wanted us to be more involved in education in a much more sustained way and in a much deeper way. And so, just like serendipity, what happened then was, as I was thinking about this, how do I go about this? I had a call from the Department of the Environment asking me if I would be prepared to take on the running of the Blue Flag for Beaches campaign in Ireland. Now, the interesting thing about that is it's a programme of FEE, the Foundation for Environmental Education. And while on the one hand it appears to be just a programme about quality beaches, of course it is, but one of the big platforms of all FEE programs is education in one way or another. education of the public, education of, it's not just contained to schools.
Right.
So environmental education was a big part of that. So we took it on to do. It meant working with every local authority in the country. And that was the key to the future success of so many other things that we subsequently went on to do. I needed to build the unit.
Right.
And so what I wanted to do was to bring in professional staff.
Right.
That was the key. I had found that when I was in the chair of An Taisce. Volunteers are wonderful, and we had wonderful volunteers, but we had people on our executive committees that you couldn't employ because they were professors in universities and so on, and it was their expertise. Then you needed professional staff to come in under that and then proceed to do the documents, do the work, because they had to go back to their jobs. The Blue Flag, and I've got funding for that, and so I take on a part-time person.
Right.
So I've one part-time staff and myself. I ran it for the first year on my own as a volunteer, and then I'm building the unit, and then I move. Then the fee then comes on, and they start the young reporters for the environment programme. And I was involved with that right from the word go. So I then went out and got sponsorship to do that programme, and then I began to work with schools and with the Marino Institute of Education, for instance. The unit began to grow then, you see. Bit by bit, it was a question of looking for support. Now at this stage I had no government support. But what I had links now with organisations within FEE in other countries, and the UK was a particularly rich one from my point of view, because I got to be very close with the organisation in England, which was the Tidy Britain Group, and they had organisations in Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland and England. It was when I was away in Spain at one meeting, and I shared a bus for 3 hours on a bus. Sitting beside me was the person from the UK, and he started to tell me about the things that they were doing there, totally different from FEE, other programmes that they were running. And they had been running a programme called National Spring Clean for 10 years. And they had he said, I think that one of our sponsors is very keen to run that in Ireland. Would you like to meet them? Now, I won't go into a long detail about that. That was in 1994. That's right, it was in 1994. And I went over to England. When I say that I came back from the UK with a programme that had been tried and tested over 10 years, with 3 sponsors in my hand, as a gift, no strings attached, nothing. And I came back here with the sponsors. I went to the government and I said, will you support me pound for pound if I take these on board? And they said yes.
This is a National
Spring Clean. And it began 20 years ago, and in the last 5 years we have had 500,000 people every year joining that campaign. It's still running.
Where did you start the Green School Programme?
That was then a relationship built up with the UK. I now had another campaign that I was running, so now I had more staff running that campaign. And then FEE came up. I went to the UK in 1996 for a Blue Flag meeting, and at it they rolled out this programme. They showed a video of a programme that they had just come up with in FEE. They had. It was in response to Rio, and the
Rio
call,
conference in '92,
and the call for a sustainable life. And FEE, of course, being imbued in education, their thing was, what can we do to respond to this call? We should do something in education. It needs to be an education programme. And so what they did was they applied to the European Union for funding to put together a programme that would respond to this call from Rio. And at this meeting that I went to in '96, they had just completed that programme, 3 years with funding from the EU. 5 countries had got together who were all members of FEE, and they had invented eco schools, as it's called in other parts of the world. It was so clever. It was a program designed for schools which had the children at the heart of it. You have a committee. The children are the committee. They're guided by a teacher, who's called the coordinating teacher. But together, they decide that they are going to be the committee and they're going to become an eco school. And they had laid out a totally organised framework of how you would do this. There are 7 steps to the program, and the first one is you have a committee, you put together a committee, and then you move on through the 7 steps, and it's a progression. And in my view, it was the most wonderful program that was invented, because it can be as simple or as complex as you like. It is totally flexible.
So you're exposed to this Eco Schools program. Then how did you? And you've been building up the staffing with these other programs within the education unit.
Yes.
So then how do you launch what you now call green schools, right, instead of Eco Schools?
Well, at this stage, I'm coming back and I'm inspired.
Okay.
And the following week, I have a meeting of local authorities who we had a meeting with every year in the spring to discuss the Blue Flag for Beaches campaign. Now, they were all coastal local authorities, so there were some who weren't there. They would have been, that don't have coast in their remit, but they would. We had our meeting and we talked about Blue Flag and anything new, bathing water directive wise or whatever. And at the end of it, I said to them, by the way, before we go, I must tell you about this new program that I just heard about last week. It's called Eco Schools. And it's such a fantastic program. I think this is going to be amazing. And I told them about it. It's a program for schools where the children are the committee and they make it happen. And that was fine. At the end of the meeting, a fellow called Jerry O'Sullivan from Kerry County Council came up and said to me, Pat, that sounds wonderful, you've got to do it. And I said, Jerry, go away. I haven't got any money and this is going to require staff. And he said, Kerry County Council will contribute £1,000. It was pounds at the time. Will contribute £1,000 to get you started. And I thought, and I said, Jerry, £1,000 is wonderful, but he said, I'll make it 2. And do you know that on the way home in the car, I thought, if Jerry O'Sullivan from Kerry County Council would give me £1,000, would any other local authority give me? And the following morning, I began to ring. And by the end of the day, I had 5 local authorities signed up for 3 years. And with that, I had a commitment of £5,000. And with that, I was able to hire my first part-time staff member. No, it was being called different things in different countries because eco schools, because there are so many different countries. It was called eco school in Denmark, and then it was different. So there was an organisation here, which actually had begun in Taisce, a youth organisation called ECO. It still exists, Eco UNESCO, and does excellent work, and it does a lot of training in schools and so on. And that had started in Taisce, but I didn't want to cut across their work. Do you know what I mean? And eco schools would have been confusing then to be called that when there was an organisation called Eco. So I asked Fee, is it all right if we call it green schools? And they said perfect. And that was the beginning. One of the great things for us was our relationship with the UK, who had been one of the countries which was involved in the pilot. They gave us all their materials. Their materials had been designed because they had the money from the EU. They had commissioned materials from the University of Southampton. So they had first-class materials. And all we had to do was to look at them in the context of the Irish curriculum and Irish schools. And literally we got 2 teachers actually in, a primary and a secondary school teacher. We asked them to come in and go through the material and see how it fitted or where there was anything that didn't fit. And really there was very little difference, but we did tailor make it to the Irish education system. We began with the waste issue, and that was the first theme. Now, in other countries, you have the three main themes are waste, energy, and water. And in other countries, what they did was they brought in the program, and schools began with waste, energy, and water, and that you would begin by doing a analysis of these in relation to your school. How much waste were you producing? How much energy are you using? How much water are you using? We decided, because at that time everything was the timing, this was what was so helpful to us. Just at that moment, the government were issuing all their waste plans and recycling plans, and local authorities now had responsibility in terms of waste. You know, they were beginning to really focus on waste just at a time when we said, let's leave energy and water and go with waste.
This is when EPA, the Irish EPA, now in existence since '92, is starting to issue the waste regulations.
Absolutely, the waste regulations local authorities have responsibility for, and suddenly here we were. And our program, very quickly, local authorities could see that what our program was doing was handing them, if you like, a program in schools that was reducing the waste from schools to landfill. And our research, very quickly after a couple of years, our research showed that schools were diverting, on average, 45% waste from schools to landfill. It's a voluntary program for schools. They don't have to do it. And that's been the thing that's been extraordinary about it, that over all the years, and we've been doing it now for 20 years, we haven't had schools that have dropped out. They have said, can we take a break, because they may be doing building work, or the coordinating teachers on maternity leave, or so they'll maybe take a break. But we have schools that have been in the program and teachers who have been working with us for 20 years. We supply them with all the materials, and then we run these seminars all over the country that the teachers come to, and then when they feel that they're ready, but it's usually not under 2 years. They do one theme for 2 years. They get in touch and say that they think they're ready for the flag. They want to go for the flag. So if it's their first
this is
flag,
the green flag.
The green flag is the ultimate prize.
And that's for just the one theme, for say waste, or
the
for
first
all three?
flag is for waste.
Okay.
Second flag is for energy. It takes another 2 years. And we now have we've 97% of all schools in the country in the programme. You can imagine. This, in 2015, we awarded 3,500, we had 3,500 flags flying. And we actually awarded 2,000 flags this year at 22 award ceremonies all over the country. So the success was that because the local authorities became our partners at the beginning to support it financially, they then became engaged, because their environmental awareness officers then had a role. Before that, the local authority provided services to the schools, but they didn't really have a role inside the school. But now the environmental awareness officers had a school running a program that was making a difference at a local level, and they then became the people who would visit the school for us and decide whether they passed the test. Now, we always carry out at least 30% of the visits ourselves, and we do a random sample, because from keeping a level, keeping a standard. So we carry out 30% of all the visits ourselves. And so the thesis is that you want to live a more sustainable life. So what it actually is, when you boil it all down, it's changing behaviour. And changing behaviour is very slow and quite difficult. But actually, this is a perfect behaviour change programme, because it becomes anathema to leave the lights on.
Now, one of the things we've talked about in the past too here, and I think it'd be useful for the audience to hear, is that the 97% obviously is a very impressive number. Talk about the transition into the universities and colleges. Within the last 5 years, is it, or so?
Yes, it's about 5 years.
Uh-huh.
So what happened was we thought about third level, and we sort of tested, and we found that this was going to be extremely difficult, we believed. Because what you had a huge organisation. You've got a university here.
Right.
You've got students, but you've got the academic staff, you've got the management, you've got the maintenance, you've all the, so you've a big lot of people there.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about, it has to, what we call Greens is a whole school programme.
Right.
And that's what it has become, because it's not just, it's the coordinating teacher and the students on the thing, but it becomes the whole school programme at its best.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought, how do you do this? And we thought, we'll never get them together into a committee. And then one day we had a phone call, and it was a girl, and she said, I want to know about, the Green Schools. I'm in University College Cork. And we kind of said, well, do you know about the Green Schools programme? You see, it's a long-term. Yes, I know all that. I was the chair of my Green Schools committee. No, I think I'm saying right that she was the chair, or she was certainly on the Green Schools committee, and had been in primary and then secondary. Was now in university. Was on the Students' Union, and said, why doesn't this university have a green flag? And rang us up to say, why doesn't it have a green flag? Can we get one? And we sort of went, and then we said, well, let's see what we can do. And the thing was, we worked with them, I think it was about 3.5 years we worked with University College Cork, and I must say they really stepped up to the plate. And it was quite difficult, but where the way why it worked, it was student led.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the key, it has to be student led. Because when the students called a meeting, we didn't. The Students' Union called a meeting of academic staff, maintenance staff, management and students, and they picked the people that they wanted to come, and they invited them to come. And the thing is that there was no other university in the world with a green flag. It was the very first, and it was the beginning of the Green Campus programme. Because then what we had to do was invent the Green Campus programme.
Just like you did the other ones.
Well, we didn't invent the others, were invented by fee. It was small steps, and it took quite a long time to actually, for them to come to us, to think about it, to do it, to call. And we had to work with them a lot. We actually did a lot of work with, our staff. I think they have their green flag about 3 or 4 years now.
I thought 3 or 4
Yes,
years.
and now we have,
how many
I think there are something like, I think there's about 6 other third level, universities in third level.
Who are in the process.
Who have the flag.
Oh, have the flag?
Yes, Trinity were awarded last year.
Fee adopted the
Yes.
They've now kind of taken up the program.
And other countries have started to pick up on it.
When you started the Green Schools program, there was the 3 basic themes that had to be used, and there was this infrastructure in place. Now Cork invites you in. How did you choose the theme? What theme did you use?
Well, we based the whole thing on the Green Schools program as it existed, and we said, this is the way you have to go too.
Oh, so you applied that to waste?
Exactly.
Waste, litter, and energy? Okay.
Exactly.
So they had
except in a university, imagine the waste, imagine the amount of waste and where it's all coming from, and how many people you have to deal with. The great development of the whole thing is that the universities are now demanding that their suppliers are green. This year, for the first time, we actually awarded a Green Campus flag to a teaching hospital. And Cork University Hospital were awarded their green flag this year, the first hospital in the world to get a flag.
There's no stopping you, Pat.
Well, it wasn't. Just imagine.
They came to you. They came to you.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's an evolution.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. Obviously, if I'd sat down and dreamed of what you might achieve. But you know, when we were back in the day when we started,
Right.
it wouldn't have occurred to me.
It's a nice way to be finishing up your career at Taisce, isn't it?
Well, it is, yeah. It's been a roller coaster, really.
Yeah.
The big thing is to sustain it. That was always my worry from the very beginning. Was will this be able to sustain itself? It was such a rapid growth. You know, it went like this, and whether teachers would become tired of it or they would. No. It's because they've invented such a wonderful program. I mean, I am delighted to have been involved in rolling it out, but gosh, I wish I'd been one of the ones who invented it. I suppose it's the fact that I feel we did something practical. You know, I mean, when you're involved in any organisation that is campaigning, it can be quite, you know, it can be sometimes very frustrating. In this particular instance, we all feel, well, we then started to do something positive, and we actually, I think, have made a difference and are making a difference.
Now, before we leave, though, I do want to say that, and I hope I'm not letting anything out of the bag, but you are going to be awarded an honorary degree.
Yes, that's right. The National University of Ireland at Maynooth. It's. I'm still stunned.
Yeah.
They are planning to award me an honorary doctorate in law.
And that's in a couple of weeks.
It's in a couple of weeks, yeah.
Pat, congratulations.
So, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for talking with us, and thanks for all you've done for Green Schools program here in Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.